Before we begin our service and celebration of life, I planted that phone to go off so that we'd be reminded to silence our phones and set everything to vibrate or off so as not to disturb the sanctity of our service. Let us treasure the time we have and resolve to use it well, counting each moment precious, a chance to apprehend some truth, to experience some beauty, to conquer some evil, to relieve some suffering, to love and to be loved, to achieve something of lasting worth. May we fulfill the promise that is in each of us, and to conduct ourselves so that generations hence it will be true to say of us, the world is better because for a brief space we lived in it. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, and we begin our service with recitation of psalms and prayers, linking Larry's life with the thousands of years old tradition of the people Israel and the eternality of God. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi yagor b'ha'alecha, mi yushkon bahar kadshecha, a psalm of David. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity, do what is right, speak the truth without deceit. Have no slander upon your tongue and do no evil to others. Do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere Adonai. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates. Accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, then shall you stand firm forever. The way of God is perfect. The word of Adonai is pure. God is a shield to all who seek refuge. Rabbi Tarfon taught, the day is short, the task is great, the workers are sluggish, the reward is bountiful, and the master is insistent. This was a favorite teaching of Rabbi Tarfon, that you are not obligated to finish the task, but neither are you free to abandon it. If you have studied much Torah, you will earn reward, for our master is sure to repay you for your efforts. But know that the reward for the righteous is reserved for some future time. We are all destined to die. We share it with all who ever lived and with all that will be. Cry for the dead, hide not your grief. Do not restrain your mourning, but remember that continuing sorrow is worse than death. When the dead are at rest, let their memory be a source of peace, and be consoled when the soul departs. Death is better than a life of pain, and eternal rest is better than constant sickness. We are here to celebrate the life of Larry Neimark. With his death just days ago, our lives are forever changed. Today we stand together at one of life's most natural and unnatural moments. Death silences us with the power to take from us without concern the pain it leaves in the wake. A man we cared about, whom we respected and loved. Words catch in our throats as we give voice to our grief. We try to speak of Larry's life, and at times it is difficult. It is right, though, that we speak what's in our hearts and in our minds, knowing that our words are inadequate, that they could never fully capture the depth of pain that touches our hearts this day. But words are all we have. So we start with Carol, your husband of 57 years. He was your life's companion and your love. You have lost a huge part of your life. In the years you spent with Larry, you created a family, a legacy, and you've shared a special bond. Together you faced life's joys and its hardships, supporting one another. Your pain and sorrow are profound this day. We who care for you wish to lighten your burden and ease your pain but we cannot. Our words are inadequate to convey the depth of pain we feel for such a significant loss. And so we walk with you as your community and extended family. And to Ron and Beth, Cheryl Beth, you are the light of your father's life. He loved you. He was so proud of you. You gave him reasons to kvel, to feel such joy and naches from having you as his children. You've brought him so much happiness. And the noble way you, all three of you, took care of him at the end of his life. Such a mitzvah. No greater honor could you have brought to him. Your loss is so huge, there are no words that can bring comfort, except to continue to share the memories of the legacy of love and service that he leaves, not only to you, but to us all. And so at this time, we invite forward Rabbi Stephen Bob to offer some recollections of Larry's life.
When two Jews meet for the first time, they often engage in an effort to prove that even though this is their first conversation, they're actually strongly connected. They play a game we call Jewish geography. Generally, the game yields modest results. You discover that you both once shopped at the same store. When I first met Larry 40 years ago, we began playing the Minnesota version of Jewish geography. And we quickly discovered actual results. I knew Larry's sister Rhoda. Rhoda and my mother were good friends. I can still today visualize their house, I think on 39th Street. We were at 38th in France, they were a few blocks away. We all went to the same synagogue. I had known Larry's father. He was one of my family were Shabbos regulars. He was one of the Shabbos regulars. We sat, it was a different sanctuary obviously, but we sat over there, and Mr. Neimark sat with Mr. Lurie over there. As a little boy, I saw them as the venerable old men of the congregation. This is a conservative synagogue. The service is led by a rabbi and by the cantor, and Mr. Lurie and Mr. Neimark participated loudly in the service, almost with the chazan. One of them was half a word ahead of the cantor, one of them was half a word behind the cantor, with enthusiasm and confidence. I can't remember which one Larry's father was, but I can see him sitting there. Larry and I enjoyed sharing these Minnesota stories. Larry was at least half a generation older than me, so he knew things and understood things that I did not. I would say something and then he would tell me the rest of the story. He remembered the Minneapolis Jewish community back into a decade and a half earlier than I did. But we had a wonderful time exchanging these stories. And he would say to me, don't you know this and don't you know that? And I would have to say, well, yes, we went to Bruchen's, but Mr. Bruchen was this, and I was a little boy, and he was an adult. But it was a wonderful, wonderful exchange. The Neimarks, all of you were central players in my first years here as rabbi of the congregation. I know, Ron, you're an adult, but I still think you was little Ronnie. So, yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So Ron was part of my first cohort of B'nai Mitzvah students. In those days, I did all of the B'nai Mitzvah preparation myself. Ronnie and Howie Stoller used to come together for their lessons. And I used to think of them in terms of a movie that was popular at that time. I saw them as the Jew brothers, Jake and Elwood. Now, I understand you're both adults. For a long time, you've been both adults, but in my eyes, I still hearken back to that time. Beth was part of our first Youth Israel trip. Carol chaired the youth committee that created that trip. Before that, Carol was part of the search committee that brought me to the congregation. We know each other. When Larry became president of the congregation, people were worried that he and I would clash. Larry had a well-earned reputation for being careful. I believe the expression belt and suspenders were invented to describe Larry. I, in those days, and really still, I was always bubbling over with new ideas for new congregational projects. And more than one of you took me aside and said, "You and Larry are going to have a trouble." In truth, we had no problems working together. We saw ourselves as the Minnesota twins. Not identical twins, we're fraternal twins. But we understood each other, and we respected each other. We never spoke a word of anger to each other. We solved every problem we faced. We even negotiated a new contract for me without difficulty. There was one point where Larry said, "I think we have to hurry this up." My first sabbatical took place in the summer of 1988, I believe. Well, Larry was president of the congregation. And I was on sabbatical, but I was physically present in the community. In those days, I had a little office in the corner of the library at Elmhurst, what was then called Elmhurst College. And Larry didn't bother me all summer long. Then one day, I had a phone call from him. The sanctuary had been recarpeted, and everything had been taken out of the sanctuary, and he and others had replaced the ark. And he asked me if I would stop by when no one else was here to make sure they had put back the ark correctly. Of course it was put back right there. But he wanted to be sure that it had been done correctly. Nothing would be sloppy, nothing would be out of place, nothing would be disrespectful. He needed to know that he had done things correctly. Larry was also my tutor in home ownership. I think it was our first year here in the community that we were invited to the Neimark's home for Break the Fast at the conclusion of Yom Kippur. You can correct me, but as I recall, there was a house crisis as we walked in the front door. I think it was the hot water heater. I'm not sure that it was the hot water heater, but what I am sure about that Larry knew exactly what to do. And as a rookie homeowner, I would have had no idea. But Larry understood the symptoms, understood what the solution was, and despite the fact that the entire Jewish people was walking in the front door, he was there to figure it out and solve the problem. At the synagogue, Larry also solved problems. He did not get distracted by the nonsense. In his prime, Larry stood tall and upright. And this is how I think of him, standing tall, literally and metaphorically. If Larry was satisfied, I knew everybody would be satisfied. Larry helped all of us stand tall. As we remember Larry, let's be inspired by his example. Let us all strive to stand tall. Let us all try to live upright lives.
David Stahl wrote some remarks and asked me to read them on his behalf. He wrote, "Larry remembered. I met Larry in the early 1960s when I was looking for a facility to perform some post-irradiation testing of nuclear fuels. However, I don't remember whether he convinced me to use argon cells or those of Idaho National Laboratory. We continued to interact over the years, but we didn't become good friends until I graduated with my PhD degree in 1972 and was looking for work. My old company took a different direction upon my return and was no longer pursuing research. Larry gave me a job in his group performing examinations of nuclear fuels that had undergone transient testing. I don't recall whether he played a role in my becoming a group leader myself in 1974, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did. We developed a lasting friendship, as did Betty and Carol, who were both teachers. We also both became active in the congregation, with both becoming president. I asked him once why he had not completed his dissertation for his PhD since he had completed the coursework. He replied that life got in the way. Not having the degree did not impact his work at Argonne, as he was highly respected. Our discussions were always frank with no punches pulled. You always knew where Larry stood on an issue. In my mind, I felt that he was always a control freak, at least at work, and I hopefully convinced him that he could lower his stress level if he dedicated more to his staff, who were very, very capable. I think that he eventually came around to my suggestion. After leaving Argonne in 1981, we were able to return every few years to see Carol and Larry and our other friends at Etz Chaim. We continued to visit after he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, but on some occasions we had to be flexible because he tired easily. However, he was always sharp when we reminisced about the old days and discussed current happenings. When we left, I always told him that I loved him. He once said that he loved me too, which brought a tear to my eye. I always thought of Larry as the brother I never had, and I will miss him dearly. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts with you." Jerry Wolin sent me some recollections, and he also recalled, which shows the man Larry truly was. Jerry wrote, "Carol and I joined Etz Chaim in 1965, and the Neimarks joined not too much after, so that we have known them for a long time. In addition, we lived in Elmhurst, just a few blocks from them, so we spent a lot of time together. Among other things, we had a mutual love of DeLeo's roasted chicken. Our families played a role in the early development of Etz Chaim, including addressing questions such as whether we could afford to build and manage a building of our own. In many of these meetings, Larry often played a role of devil's advocate. He was very smart and very analytical. He knew what questions to ask to help to get the right answer. Frankly, at times, his questioning could be a pain in the butt, but I have no doubt that we ended up making better decisions because of his analytical mind. Larry and I also shared the challenging experience of surviving the flood of 1987, which greatly impacted many homes in Elmhurst. We could not live in our homes for about 3 weeks, and thanks to the gracious hospitality of Mimi and Norm Silverstein, the Neimarks and we stayed at the Silverstein home for the entire 3 weeks. Larry and I would toil during the day getting the water out of our homes and cleaning things up. We would return to the Silversteins each night, dragging our tired bodies back for some nourishment and support. It was a character-building experience for both of our families, and the support we received from each other, as well as the Silversteins and other temple members, helped us get through a very difficult period. There is another aspect to Larry that may come as a surprise. There is no doubt that Larry was a typical scientist in every meaning of the word. He did have one unique characteristic that made him different. Larry had a great capacity for off-color jokes and stories. These always added to the enjoyment of our times together. He will be missed for his great mind and great sense of humor. A few months ago, Larry and Carol asked me to come and sit with them to discuss what Larry wanted on this day, because he knew it was an inevitable, and these were things that he wanted to make sure that we mentioned. And while many of the subjects were already covered, I wanted to weave a few more stories about Larry that I know he would have appreciated our mentioning. Larry was born in Minneapolis to Celia and Helman Neimark, and he was the youngest of 4 children. And he loved his family, and he loved the family that he created. In fact, there's a wonderful love story that many of you know, but I think it's worth mentioning today. Larry graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1958 with a master's degree in metallurgy, and he went on to Argonne National Laboratory, where he worked for 40 years, where he was a senior scientist, and he managed the Alpha Gamma Hot Cell Facility. But my favorite story is the story of how Larry and Carol met in May of 1964. They got engaged in July of 1964 and married in November of 1964. But here's the story. So they met at a dance at the Horwich Center, and Carol's friend couldn't come that night, and I got the backstory from your cousin. Carol didn't even want to go to this dance, but her aunt and uncle made her go, and she went in alone. And Larry was standing there, and he said that he felt a heavenly hand on his shoulder that said, "Go ask her to dance. You're going to marry her." Well, of course, he had to wait because Carol had already started dancing with somebody else. But then he got to dance with her, and he asked her out. On their first date, Carol said it was wonderful. See, she worked on Michigan Avenue, and so he picked her up there, and they went to the Churchill House in Michigan, and after they went to the Happy Medium Comedy Club in a hotel downstairs, where Larry knew Harry Cool from Minnesota, who was the maitre d'. And as they are being seated, Larry started humming into Carol's ear, "Here Comes the Bride." Together they watched the show, and then they went outside, and they took a horse and buggy ride. And they were under the lights of Michigan Avenue. And at the same time, Warren Beatty was filming a movie called Mickey 1 in Pigalle Alley. So they watched the filming of that for a little while, and then he took her back home to Glencoe. Carol said she knew she was going to go back for a second date, and so she stopped dating others. But Larry wasn't sure that she really did stop dating others, so he went to the next dance to see if she was there, and she wasn't. So they started dating every weekend. And after another series of dates over the next few months, they went to a play. And after the play, they sat talking in the driveway. And in the driveway, Larry told Carol that he loved her and asked her to marry him. And Carol said yes. So they went inside to tell Carol's aunt and uncle and her cousin. And the cousin looked at them and said, "Finally." When they told Larry's father, he was so excited that he started speaking in Yiddish. And then they called Carol's family, and they traveled to Providence, Rhode Island to meet Carol's family. So they went to shul, they went to the synagogue, and everyone came to meet Larry. 100 people came to the shul that night. And for the wedding in Rhode Island, Larry's family drove from Minnesota. And of course, they settled here. The reason Carol said they had such a good life together was they shared the same outlook on life. Family was the most important thing to him. Their children knew how much he loved and cherished them. In fact, Beth, I think he called you the apple of his eye. And after family, you guys, the Jewish community, and friends were central to Larry and Carol's lives. Larry was committed to serving the Jewish community here at Congregation Etz Chaim. Harvey Siegel recalled that Larry recruited him after he and Linda had just joined, that plans were being made for the land that they owned, and Harvey said that Larry could marshal forces. Never did he make you feel obligated to serve, but he could get you to work on behalf of the mission of growing the congregation. Larry was a part of a strong group of congregational leaders like Norm and Mimi Silverstein, who found a way to get people to work on behalf of the congregation. He asked you to serve with him, sleeves rolled up together, but he also made the space, Harvey said, that you could say no to him as well. Larry handled his illness with dignity and grace. He never gave in to it. At Carol and Larry's 50th wedding anniversary at the Oakbrook Club, Steve Samuels played on the piano Fly Me to the Moon, their song. Larry gave a speech, and then they danced together, truly a memory to cherish. It is said that there are no blessed deaths, though some are more peace-giving than others. And we can't know the reason for death, but we can face it with dignity, without despair. And it is my hope that the legacy of love and service that Larry leaves to us will continue to inspire us and guide us through all the days of our lives. And in this way, death cannot separate him, for when we remember Larry, he will continue to live on, even in death. I'm going to bring everyone's attention to the second page of the service handout, and I'm going to ask that we read the 23rd Psalm together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I ask at this time, if you are able to do so, to please rise. El male rachamim, shochein bamrumim, hametzei mechuna nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, im kadoshim utahorim, kizor harakia, mazhirim. Et nishmat Lazer ben Helman shahalacha le'olamo. Ba'al harachamim yastireha b'seter knafav le'olamim. Vayitzror b'tzror hachayim et mishmato. Adonai hu nachalato. V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkavo. V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Lawrence Neimark, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say together, Amen. I ask you to remain standing at this time and to take the Mourner's Kaddish on the final page of the service booklet while we recite Kaddish Atom, the Mourner's Kaddish.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yamechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv imru, Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yit hadar, v'yit aleh, v'yit halal, shmei dekudasha barichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, Hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Zichrono livracha, may Larry's memory always truly be for a blessing.
Please be seated. This concludes our formal celebration of life, but it is customary during this time of the meal of condolence, followed by the Shiva Minyan, for us to tell stories about Larry's life, to remember Larry, and to share these with the family to bring comfort. And so we're going to allow the family to exit the sanctuary first, and then when everyone gets into the social hall, we will offer our condolences to them at this time. May you who mourn and all who know sorrow and pain soon know comfort and peace. And now we go forth together in peace to life. Will the congregation please rise?